Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to OSW Daily, wherever you're watching in the world. Open Source Workplace Daily Show live stream is all about having a conversation around work-related topics that are trending with thought leaders and experts in the field. I'm your host. My name is Steve Todd. I'm Global Head of Workplace at NASDAQ and the founder of OpenSourceWorkplace.com. Today we'll have a very interesting conversation. We have a couple of guests who have probably different opinions on what the future of work is. So I'm really excited to dig into this. You know, business leaders, CFOs, business owners, CEOs, real estate, HR, technology folks have been asking themselves the last 6 months, what is the future of work? What does that actually mean? What does that mean for our organization? And we're hearing completely new terms: office first companies, work from anywhere companies, hybrid, structured hybrid, unstructured hybrid. What does that mean? There's so much noise. Well, today I'm very happy to welcome a couple of guests who we hopefully will help unpack some of those questions. So who's today's guest? Today's guest is Chris Hurd, who is the CEO of Firstbase, and Jonathan Schultz, who is the co-founder and managing partner of Onyx Equities. So gentlemen, come on in. Welcome to OSW Daily. Hello, how you doing?
What's happening?
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for thank you for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's something that I've been actually quite excited about because I think you do have a different opinion. I think we're going to have a very engaging conversation that can actually help the audience really see different perspectives. So first, Chris, let's do a little introduction into who you are and what Firstbase is.
Chris Hurd, the founder and CEO of FirstbaseHQ.com, and we help companies supply, finance, and manage all the physical equipment their remote workers need to be as safe, comfortable, and productive at home as they would be in an office.
Great, thank you. And Jonathan?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be here. I love that there's two of us, so you don't have to hear my voice this entire segment. But my company is Onyx Equities, as you said. We are an owner of office buildings, shopping centers, industrial buildings, and we are dabbling now in building some residential properties that were extra land on some of our office properties that we bought with, campuses and corporate campuses. And we also do early stage tech investing. So we're in prop tech, some consumer tech, and I'm a technology freak. So I've been enjoying at least real estate coming into the age finally of technology.
Great. And I got a little distracted. I got a little thumbs up on the screen, and we're not really used to that. So that means that people are watching and people like this. So if you're watching, please do give us the thumbs up because it helps everybody here know what's going on. So thank you. So look, I really want to sort of ask some leading questions and let you guys both sort of dig into what this is. So Jonathan, whenever I say to you future of work, what does that mean to you?
First of all, I think everything we say here today, we're going to be wrong, right? It's just what percentage of right will this go? Because we are in my mind, the biggest experiment and change in office that I've ever felt in my career. So future of work means to me flexibility. And as you said at the beginning, there's all these terms: hybrid, work from home, at WF, all these sayings now that everyone's, bantering around the internet and in conversations. To me, we need to decide what that is as an industry. And I think companies are going to do that differently. I mean, there's going to be some companies that feel office first, or being in the office is a very important fact for their company's growth, synergy, culture, and whatever we define that prior to COVID, right? I mean, we've been going for 15 years creating culture in our minds and in our thoughts. The other will be someone that feels, wow, I mean, this technology actually works. People seem happier. So I'm going to be more of a remote first company, but I don't think you could be in the middle. I think unless you define it as a company, then everyone's confused. So that's my view. And I think there will be a change, just like there was after 9/11. There will be a structural change. I just don't know to what level that completely is at this point.
Great. And what about you, Chris?
I think there's a lot of talk about the future of work, and I think in many respects it's actually a misnomer. What people are really talking about in many respects is the future of living. And I think what we've lived through um, is a worsening environment for working in the office for the last 50 or 60 years, where we started out with these private workspaces to do deep focused work. And because the cost per square foot continue to increase, we've ended up in these open plan distraction factory adult kids clubs with table tennis tables and all that stuff, where it's actually super difficult to do deep focused work. And obviously, I think the major caveat we need to sort of mention is this isn't remote work as normal either. So when people are talking about the future of work, I think it's not a direct comparison to say how they've worked during COVID is the opposite of how they would work had COVID not happened. I think it's been forced work from home due to a global pandemic, which has obviously externalities and difficulties that you don't typically experience. So, yeah, I think it's always worth noting that before you sort of try and begin comparing those two terms.
That's interesting, but whenever you think about your own company, do you think about it as the future of work or the future of life? Because it is an interesting concept, right? But how do you think about it whenever you think about your own company?
Yeah, I think the way we term it is we look to make it as easy as possible for companies to improve their workers' quality of life. And that obviously starts from the perspective of how we approach that, which is from the foundation of if you don't have the right tools and equipment at home, it's incredibly difficult to be as productive as you would be in an office because that stuff's there as a byproduct.
Got it, got it. And so we sort of think about it. So we have the remote and we have the office. So open question. So Jonathan, obviously, you're very much office first type of given your business model and what it is. So question to you is the office overhyped?
I think depending on the position that you work in within any company, I mean, every company has a set of things that they do. They do accounting, they do marketing, they do sales, they do engineering and administration, construction in my company. So everybody works differently anyway. Did we design the office to fit every single divisional need over the last 20 years? We've tried to, but it was still a work in progress. So I think, and what's good and bad about COVID's given us a long enough time to actually see. And I agree with Chris. We are now forced to work from home. Does work from home really mean work from home down the road? I don't think so. I think that hashtag will go away. It's just going to be work from wherever, right? And wherever you actually feel you can do that in a way that you're productive, you feel like you live in society. I know me personally, the longer and more I actually work from home during certain weeks, the more I feel as detached and isolated and unpart of the community and society that I live in than I ever have in my entire life. And I don't like that feeling personally. So mentally, that's an issue. And I think that's an issue for most people. Now, I have older kids. I can't, imagine if you attach 3 younger kids and, also younger people having roommates and all these distractions that I think are actually worse than how we design the workplace with, like Chris was saying, right, that, parties and kegs and all these large areas where it's just noise and distraction. So I think the experiment was long enough to see, can accounting be more remote first? Maybe. Can construction? Maybe, maybe not. The jury's out. We're still tabulating and looking at how things have gone on during this time period. Certain industries have completely taken off, and some, their activity level as a company hasn't been as much. So you really can't tell, are you as productive? So, I think this is going to be a much longer time horizon as far as, what we all really think and feel. And I don't think there's one size fits all for anyone, just like I don't think there's one size fits all for anything. So that's my view on it. And I think, certain companies will master either way. It's just who's going to be the one pushing that.
Interesting. Yes, and I guess the opposite of that, Chris, then is remote working overhyped?
I think remote working during a global pandemic is massively overhyped. I think to John's point, homeschooling your children, incredibly difficult. Not being able to go to work in a coffee shop for a couple hours in the morning, incredibly difficult. Not being able to see friends and family and being able to do hobbies that you can typically do otherwise, incredibly difficult. So there's all those challenges that we're facing. And I think what people are realizing, and John touched on this as well, when people talk about the future of work, they typically go towards remote working. And I think in many people's minds, that means working from home. And that's not necessarily the case. I think good remote working and what it will be going forward will be work from anywhere. And I think that's massively underrated. The ability to work when you're most productive. So if I'm productive 5 in the morning till 11 in the morning, and then I want to come back and work at 7 at night till 10 at night, then that's, I think, what the future of work is. How can you empower people to be in the best position possible, produce the best work they've ever done in their lives? I think that's, again, massively underrated because it's only something we're really beginning to explore.
Chris, I think Chris nailed that like completely. And I'll tell you why. I'm up at 5 in the morning. I am the most productive from 5 to 8. There's not one day that I could say that I'm more productive in those other hours. Obviously, when you go to meetings, yes, and you're generating business and you're out and about doing what you're doing, of course. My wife is a night owl. She will probably be better at 12 to 2 o'clock in the morning on her deep thought and best thinking. And that's just our personalities. And again, it's getting back to the one size fits all concept. You know, we've been living in a one size fits all concept forever, from how you go to school and how the desks are set up, right? Like we lived in a manufacturing sort of society. Everything had to be efficiently and the same, and everyone does it the same. How we teach our kids in school was a one size fits all. Now that's getting blown up, and I think it's going to get blown up forever. It applies to work too. And I think it's not just about work. I think this is about like everything in life, and what technology has brought us is the ability to actually have all these different ways and changes that I think the future, and why the future will be so exciting. And I think, there's a lot of change to come.
And I think that's interesting because I think when you actually consider the implications of why that was, like go back 100 years, you've got the Industrial Revolution, the end of the factory, and that's exactly what we did, right? We pressed copy paste on education. People are going to be there, they're going to do this stuff. People are going to be in the office 9 to 5. And what we never really done as the analog world changed into a digital world is update that for knowledge-based working. And I think what we're living through right now is in many ways, the forced evolution. People like to talk about like digital for progress inside large organizations. Like personally, we've lived through that a lot through the last 20 years. Smartphones, laptops, the digitization and I guess consumerization of technology in a way that just wasn't imaginable previously. And now we have all these tools to work anywhere on the planet, to be educated anywhere on the planet, to do whatever we want, but we're not really living that, or we weren't before COVID. So I think that's like the biggest trend that we've seen.
And what Chris said before, I think resonated with me with the coffee shop. Even though we're practicing this remote work thing, and smaller mid-sized companies are actually now going onto the cloud in a bigger way than they were before. Like it's forcing everyone to get ready for the next phase. You never knew that this would be the reason why you had to get ready, but it is forcing us all to get ready, because without being in the cloud, 5G and all the other great technologies, AI, machine learning, if your data is not stored somewhere now where everyone can access it, and the large companies, when Chris talks about digital transformation, has been focused on for 15 years, and they're way on their way. Mid and small size companies that make up the bulk of space and people and ideas and entrepreneurs has not caught up. And I think this has forced us all to have to catch up. What does that do? It will open the door to this new non-manufacturing, one-size-fits-all, both learning and working way. But I still have to say that, we want to be around people. I know I do, and I think that the bottom line is that when you can't go to the coffee shop, or you can't go to the co-working space, or you can't do the things that actually also keep you together. And the workplace does that. I mean, yes. Do you want to commute Monday morning after a Sunday of a weekend as much as you do maybe during the middle of the week? No. Will that change a little? Maybe. But I do believe people want to be around each other. I think you want to feel like you have a purpose and that you're going somewhere. I was telling somebody the other day, I love sport jackets. I haven't been able to put a sport jacket on in 7 months. Like, I can't wait till I could actually put one on and go somewhere. So, and that was something that I never thought mattered as much to me, but I find now it does. So these are all the little things that I think, from the human inside part of us to, our goals, our passions, this is all going to meld in a very cool way moving forward. And I think it's why, life's fun, right? You change, you learn. So
100%. And Chris, you haven't seen John in a sports jacket. They are rather dapper. They are good. We have had a question come in from the audience, and we're all talking about flexibility. We think that's going to be the future. But here's the question: what is the best way to measure productivity in a flexible work environment, given we haven't learned the outcome of the COVID environment as of yet?
Chris, I mean, I wish I could answer that question, but like, if I answered it, I'd be lying. And again, I'll go back to, I think in some ways I see that, our productivity is still humming along. In some ways I find it harder. I don't necessarily think it's like a measurement. It's like a feeling, right? Like, when I have a question now, it's harder to go ask someone that question. So it does take longer. I mean, if you don't have clarity in what you're measuring, you can't really answer all those questions. And I'm still having trouble figuring out what the KPIs are for like this whole debacle we're actually living in with the pandemic. Chris, you may have, more measurement because of what you do.
Yeah. I think for us, I would take a step back, right? It's really easy to think you're measuring productivity while working in an office. And that's just by measuring time, right? Did Chris sit in that seat for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week? Yes, he did. Box ticked. We feel productive. It's just the natural way that people are used to working. The biggest change we've had to go through as an organization is, how do you measure outcome rather than time? Because those things aren't directly correlated. And the way we do that is by using objectives and key results, tracking that on a super granular level as to whether people are producing the amount of work that we expect them to, whether that's closing out bugs, closing out tickets, delivering these features, delivering these products. So for us, where we're delivering a product and a service that can be measured on that type of level, really easy to measure outcome. I think a lot of other industries really struggle with that. And if you can't measure outcome, it's actually incredibly difficult to measure productivity if you're not using time as that metric.
Right. So I do think every organization has different KPIs, even when they were in the office, on what productivity meant. So when people ask that, it's a difficult question to answer. I think that, everyone has been stepping up and doing the best they can with the tools they have. And I know Chris's company helps companies actually be better at that. And thank God there are companies that actually now are assisting us in how we work remotely and what we need and how to keep track of it. And, when you can't, go down the hall and ask someone a question, you need to know you have that support. So I think that, those tools are out there. We probably just never utilize them as much as we should have or could have, right, Chris? I mean, you know that better than anybody.
Yeah, I think, look, go back 10 years, there's always been these product management tools. Have middle managers enjoyed using them? No, because I think it often makes them feel less useful. And I think, it's about adopting them. It's about deploying them in the right manner and actually understanding the metrics that they're tracking. I think actually, historically, companies have been really, really bad at understanding the things that they actually want to measure. I think companies do obviously have high-level KPIs, but when you start to work remotely or work more asynchronously, which in my eyes is the step past remote working, if you're not measuring each individual's output and outcome on a granular level, then you just don't know anything about what's going on in the business. So yeah, definitely about adopting the right tools to measure the right things.
And, the real estate industry has been the dinosaur of all dinosaurs as far as adopting the technology, not the tenants, right? I'm talking just our industry as a whole. And the last 7 years, that's changed dramatically. And, we have great tools now that have allowed us to communicate from leasing, work orders. I wish we had more tenants in the building. Like, I never thought I wish I would get work orders, right? Now we want work orders because nobody's in there to give us one. And that's a joke. Obviously, we'd rather not have many. But the tools that you have and you adopt, some of them that we've been forced to adopt, right? Like building tech, different apps that now can communicate with the tenants even though they're not at the buildings, right? It's been terrific. Right now we can carry all those things that we really never wanted to change. Change is the hardest thing to do. And what Chris said is accurate. You think you have it under control. You want to be meaningful and purposeful in what you do. And as you chip away at technology to take away what you think your meaning and purpose is, it gets a little scary. So I think that's one reason why things don't adopt. And the other thing is when you're so busy every day doing your job, it's hard to change and add things in that create, friction and resistance to what you need to get your job done. Has this given us more time to do that? Probably not, but it made us have no choice. And I always say, like, you don't do what you want to do. You always do what you need or have to do. And we're now having to need and have to do a lot of things that we didn't expect 7 to 8 months ago.
For sure. So how much say do you think employees will have in the future of work?
I think there's going to be two approaches. If you go back to pre-COVID, remote working, work from home, work from anywhere was being driven by world-class talent going to their employers or people that want to employ them and saying, the only way I'm going to work for you is if you let me work in this way. And that's been, I think, the dirty secret attack for 20 years. If you're talented enough, companies will bend over backwards in order to acquire talent because in a knowledge-based economy, every company is only as good as their people. Now, actually, that equation, I think, has changed a little bit, where companies have had exposure to working in different ways. They understand that it works. They've seen that the productivity hasn't really dropped off. I think they're starting to anticipate commercial real estate savings. We spoke to a large company last week, 6-figure employees. They're going to cut their CRE by probably somewhere between 40 and 60% going forward, which is substantial. Like, you're talking billions of dollars here inside that one company. So I think that transition's happened. Companies are actually going to be the ones driving this forward. And I think at the same time, we're probably about to live through the highest period of turnover between companies we've ever seen. Some people are going to prefer to work in offices. Some people are going to prefer to work from anywhere. Some companies are going to try hybrid working. I think that's going to blow up in their faces because it's going to be the worst of both worlds. So I think it's going to be both. It's still going to be bottoms up, people demanding it. But I think more than pre-COVID, companies are going to drive this as well.
Yeah, I think, to scale any company, all that matters is your people. I mean, if you really look at why the best companies are the best companies, it's because everyone at that company feels as if that's their purpose and they own it, right? They own their job. They own why they come to work every day. They own the responsibility of what it means to have to get something done and help other people within the organization. But, managers of areas of different companies, depending how small or large you are, I think it's going to have a lot to do with the culture of each and individual group, right? I mean, some managers may feel more comfortable with not everyone being around. Some are already working that way in large companies. Some feel less comfortable. So I think because we're in this structural change of flexibility and trying to define what that means, I think it's going to take a little bit of time for everyone to sort of get into what an equilibrium might feel like. And then they'll say, well, that doesn't work or that does work. And it's going to be a lot of experimentation. And I don't think there's any one answer. I really don't. And I think the hybrid comment that Chris made is totally what, leads to that dead word you have in the title of our talk today. you can't live in the in-between. Even if you have a view and you're wrong, at least you have that view. When you're in between, I just think that's one big mess and it never works.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and it's one of the biggest dilemmas that I think is circulating within the industry. Everyone thinks we're going to end up in a hybrid world, but actually, how do you get to that point? And some may say actually a lot of organizations were drifting towards that way anyway, just because the flexibility that employees then wanted. But Chris, you also just mentioned there, right, that large company that was looking to reduce footprint by 40 to 60%. You know, we see a lot of media attention around Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Dropbox, what all these large companies are doing. Is there a danger that smaller companies are listening to the direction and what the media is saying about these organizations and therefore missing what's more important to their own individual company?
Yeah, and I would say depending on the type of company, there's going to be a bias towards a certain type of working. So if you're a small tech company, you need to hire the best person on the planet for every role. Do you need to be co-located in the same city? Probably not. That's just the reality of how startups are built. At the same time, if you're a startup in San Francisco, do you want to compete for talent there? And do you want to pay for the real estate that those guys are paying for? Again, probably not. And I think the public story has been somewhat overblown. I think obviously Dropbox, Reddit, and all these companies, although they're saying we're going to be virtual first going forward or cloud first or whatever way they're describing it, they're still keeping real estate. And I think there's a large difference between being a multi-billion or trillion-dollar business that can do whatever they want from a real estate perspective because it doesn't make a difference to their bottom line, and a smaller company where obviously it does take up a significant amount of spend. But I think, yeah, there's a real danger in being a company and trying to say, well, I'm going to copy what Apple are doing because, yeah, never copy what a monopoly is doing is probably my advice.
And we're going to have to de-densify anyway. So, like, you may not have as much space as you think, right? And I don't know, personally, to make a long-term decision potentially on a short-term issue that you haven't completely learned all the facts yet isn't always the greatest idea. Of course, if you're, a movie theater chain and you like lost 100% of your revenue in a day and you don't know where it's coming back, you're going to have to look at all your facilities. And I think whenever these things happen, you look at every cost and then you decide, what do I want to do or not want to do? Does that mean you're making the exact right decision or not swinging a pendulum so far right that, oh my God, 6 months later, a year later, you find out that wasn't the right thing? We read what we read that's happening in the moment, but that's not how it always usually ends. And I think the jury's out. A lot of people I talk to, they can't wait to get back. They know there is going to be more of a flexible, theoretical opportunity for everyone that works at these companies, but they want to get back. They want this pandemic feeling to be over. They don't want to have to worry about what am I touching when I go out my front door. Can I go there? Can I not go there? But we'll see.
Yeah, and the more we talk here, right? We all kind of agree that flexibility is going to be the key thing. We kind of, office first may not mean that everyone's in the office. Work from anywhere still means the office. Is there really a difference in your minds of whether a company's office first or work from home first?
I mean, without having the data of, all the companies out there that are experimenting, I think that, if you're, and again, it's so general, like in a sales team selling software, do they need to all be together? No, but, in other industries to collaborate from, marketing, media, do they have to get together and brainstorm and come up with, that pitch? Yes. So I think it really depends on the company, what they do there, and the manager or the credo of the company. I just think it's so hard to make this blanket statement, and I think if you do, you're missing a lot of the real information.
Yeah, and I think if if you make an apples for apples comparison, so John's example of a virtual sales team, the question then becomes, okay, what if my biggest competitor is more in one direction than the other? What advantages do they get from that? And I think that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. We would call that the remote working dilemma, where if you're doing exactly the same thing, like literally the same thing, which is highly unlikely, but let's say it's possible. You're doing literally the same thing as your fiercest competitor. There's probably a danger that if you are less remote than them, you're going to be less cost efficient and less talented because their talent pool's bigger than yours. They're not hiring, obviously, within a 30-mile radius of their physical location, and they're not paying for real estate. Does that mean that they're going to benefit all the time? No, because there are going to be times where the office first company benefits in collaboration. There's just so many intangible things that you really can't measure in terms of whether it's creativity, collaboration. And I guess that would be my final point. Like, people love talking about the benefits of one over the other. Largely, like I'll speak from a remote perspective to the office. People love to say collaboration's better in the office, human interaction's better in the office, all that stuff. And my question's always, well, how much better? Like, is collaboration 50% better in person? Probably not. Is it 20%? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? I just don't think we have the answers on that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
And then also, what's the definition? Like, my greatest ideas came from listening and sitting in a room with people that, like, it had nothing to do with me. It was about them, and then something just clicked. I don't get that on Zoom. I don't get that on conference calls. And like, I'm in business long enough to know that, like, for me, I'm not saying that's everybody, that like it's paramount to my creativity. Now, there could be other people that are more creative on Zoom or never going to the office, but you know, that's just my personal feeling.
I appreciate that. Like, gentlemen, I appreciate the time. The time is up. We're actually overtime, but I want to thank both of you for making the time, making the effort to share your opinions. But before we wrap up, any last thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me the big thing that this would be my hope for remote work, and I think this is a comparison to the office perhaps a little bit, which is I think the office has been great for very specific demographics, and I think actually the office has been difficult for certain people to get to. If you're a single parent, if you're not physically able, if you've got health conditions. So yeah, I think by providing this more flexible workspace, I think my big hope is that inclusivity and diversity becomes far easier inside organizations, because I think everyone acknowledges it's not what it should be right now inside most large businesses.
And John?
Well, to all our tenants, I can't wait to welcome you back in, however you're going to do it. I know we've been spending hours and just enormous amount of time and energy to prepare everything in all our buildings for that moment. And we're ready. We're looking forward to it. And, I wish everyone that's listening a happy Thanksgiving, and to you, Chris and Steve, as well. There's a lot to still be thankful for and grateful for, even though we've gone through the craziest year I know that I've ever felt in my life. But looking forward to a lot of cool things, with vaccine news and all the great, work that America and the globe has done together, right? You never had one problem we all had to solve at once. It's mind-boggling where we are in the progress. So that's the hopefulness I have going into 2021.
No, that's great. Like, thank you both. I appreciate your time, and as you said, Jonathan, I wish everybody who's watching a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you both. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to catch up with you both very, very soon. So cheers, guys. Thanks.
Thanks.